Good morning. We're going to continue our series on the liturgy today on the adult meeting. Let me share my screen. Um, so today we're going to talk about the liturgy and the church structure. Um, okay. Today we'll talk about liturgy and church structure. Today's the seventh lesson in our series. As you can see, we've done quite a bit on the liturgy, the history, the theology, the spirituality, the Old Testament, and the priesthood. And today we'll talk about the church structure. And it's always important to remember why we study liturgy. We talk about this every time. This allows me to fully participate in my whole being. And today shows us the importance of the church structure in the role of our spiritual life. So the church, everything in the church is symbolic. And so even the building itself is designed in such a way that's designed to elevate our minds toward God and toward what we're doing. Why just pray in a regular building when I can pray in something far more beautiful? So a quick review from last time. The word liturgy literally means work of the people. It means people, and erg means work. And so this is a public service that we undertake through the people and for the people. It's not at the people or it's on behalf of the people. That's not the case, but it's something we all do together, clergy and laity. Quick reminder, when Christ says, "Do this in remembrance of me," he uses this word anamnesis, which is the opposite of amnesia. Amnesia, of course, is to forget the future and the past, or the past and the present. And anamnesis is the opposite of that, which is to remember the past and the present. So we are remembering the actual Eucharist and the liturgy and the Last Supper at the time of the Eucharist. Some of the consequences, just reviewing from last time in history of the split between the spiritual and the liturgical life. It became optional just to understand the liturgy and just to perform. And we see this sometimes in the rites of the church. We can see that no one knows what's going on in the church. There's a big gulf between the laity and the clergy. And this ultimately gave birth to the Protestant movement that sort of denied the priesthood, denied St. Mary, denied really everything Orthodox, the Eucharist and the sacraments and the church structure and all of these things. And we put up this kind of continuum here that goes between Catholicism, which is focused on the rituals and the body. This is at the time of the Dark Ages, and then the Protestant movement that evolved out of that, which is focused on the spirit, all the meaning, and no rites. So it must be noted that some topics can be studied for the sake of knowledge and not practical application, right? So if I want to memorize, for example, the names and locations of the 12 tribes of Israel, and I want to memorize this map of the Old Testament, me today as a Christian, I can do that. But that's really something for my own knowledge. It's very hard to imagine that that's going to move me forward in my spiritual life if I memorize the name and order of all the kings, that came before and after David. But the liturgy, it can't ever be allowed to be that way. Sorry. It can't be allowed to be reduced to such a secular a collection of names and dates, in fact. And so we study all of these things for the spiritual life. So even the church structure and the building is studied for the spiritual life, the daily participation in the life, the feast, the fast. We want to look up and we want to be able to feel God's presence. And so we don't learn the church to learn the rules and regarding its structure and what we're supposed to do. You're supposed to do this. Rather, it helps elevate our own minds to the heavenly life, which we're trying to obtain. So that's the whole idea. Is it's supposed to put you in heaven. It's supposed to be an icon of heaven itself and give you a glimpse into where it is we're going. To help us as people as humans with limited visibility, limited eyesight, limited vision, to see what we can't see. And so that's the idea, is it guides our minds, and it's worthless, this design, if we don't understand what it means, right? If the church went through all of this trouble to create all of these thoughts and ideas, and let's build it like this, and then people will think this, and then you don't, you just end up walking in and walking out, then it kind of loses its purpose. So one of the reasons we study all these rituals is the church structure in particular, so we can actually benefit when we walk into the church. So the church building has three shapes, as many of you know: the cross, the ship, and Noah's Ark. The ship is Noah's Ark, and then the circle, the symbol of infinity. And the question is why? Is this what God wants? And the answer is no. God does not ask us to build like this. This isn't going to appease God in somehow if we build our church according to these rules. Rather, it's designed for me, right? It's designed so that when I walk into a ship, I think I'm in a ship, right? A ship saves me from the water. It saves me from the ocean. In the ship, I am safe. In the ship, I am saved, right? I have to stay in this ship, right? And that's for me. God doesn't need me to be sitting in a ship, a church building shaped like a ship. He doesn't need me to, to be in a cross and go, oh, look at now, now you're ritualistically correct. He doesn't really care. It's for my limited and small mind to try to grasp what God has done for me. And this is really the primary objective of the church buildings. So this is what the cross looks like from an aerial view. So there's lots of churches that are shaped like a cross. This is another one. You can see this one is an Orthodox one, and it's shaped more like a Coptic cross. And you'll often find 5 domes on some of these churches. So a big one for Christ in the middle, and then the 4 evangelists on the sides. This one is St. Mina's Church in Riverside. This is obviously shaped like a ship, and it even has oars that come out of it because that's the design and that's the intent of the design. And then finally a circle, right? So this is St. George's Church in Egypt, and you can see that the whole thing is a complete circle. We'll talk about the circle, but the circle is always a symbol of eternity, because it has no beginning and no end. So just like eternity has no beginning and no end, a circle or a ring, even, that's why we wear rings for weddings, it's the symbol of God, this idea of no beginning and no end. So the church building itself has 3 main sections: the narthex, a nave, and the sanctuary. The narthex down here is where we start, as where we walk in. Oftentimes there are 3 doors entering the church, which is always symbolic of the Trinity. So not just because we want 3 to be the Trinity, but because the beginning of the belief, the faith in Orthodoxy and Christianity is the Trinity. So we walk in, and often right as you walk in, on the right-hand side, you have the baptistry. We'll talk about that in a second. The nave is the main body of the church, literally means the body. And then the sanctuary is where we put the altar. Sometimes people will nickname it, that's the altar. It's not the altar, it's the sanctuary. And then oftentimes there'll be 3 doors here: a main, the royal door, and then 2 deacon doors that come in from the side. And we'll talk about all of these in a bit. So the first thing is the baptistry is right as you walk in. It's on the northwest corner in the church. So it's right as you walk in, it's on your left. And the reason we put it there is because after someone is baptized, he walks in the west, and then he gets baptized, and he moves forward to the east, right? And he moves from the left to the right. And so we always put the baptistry there on the northwest corner, which is the left west side. And William Shoikem used to have this beautiful thought that he said: as soon as you enter the church, always look to your left there and see where you were born. And people like to go back and visit where they were born, the city they were born in, the hospital, the apartment that they came home to. And he said, do that. Walk by and look and say, I was born there, right? This is when I started my life. The baptistry can take several shapes. Usually it's a circle, again, the symbol of eternity, but it could also take the shape of a cross. And I've seen some that look like an octagon, and the octagon has 8 sides on it. And the number 8, it has a beautiful symbol, because 8 is the number of the resurrection. It's the number of newness, right? Because God created the world in 7 days, right? So 7 days is a symbol of completeness, right? He completed the whole thing in 7 days. So that's this complete number, right? And then once you start the next day, right, then the 8th day, it's the new beginning. It's starting a new week, right? And so from the very beginning, this is why Christ chose to resurrect on a Sunday, right? And he started something new, right? And then the church, the apostles, quickly moved the holy day from Saturday to Sunday. And everyone realized that Sunday is the first day of the week and the 8th day of the week, right? So it starts a new beginning and something after the period ends of what the eternal, the initial creation was. And then sometimes even they have separate entrances and separate stairs into the church. So sometimes the baptistry will have its own doors. And so the baptized comes in from those doors from the west. He walks in, he gets baptized, or she, and then he walks into the church through a different set of doors, right? It's almost as if the old man is dead, the old creation is dead, right? And now I'm entering as a new person, a new beginning. And then sometimes even you have a different set of stairs, right? So like this one in Ephesus, I was there and I saw this baptistry in the ground. I loved it. So it gets filled with water. You walk in from one side, from the west, you get baptized, and you don't even walk out the same stairs. You walk out a different set of stairs because you are a new man, a different creation. So you don't even come in the way you went out. You don't even go out the way you came in. And so it's a very beautiful symbol of how big and how important the baptism was. All right, so now this is the church building, just kind of a cutout. Here you have the narthex back here. This is the nave in the middle. This one is shaped like a cross, obviously. And then the sanctuary in here. And then here you have this dome up on top. So we'll kind of go through. We said that the baptistry is down here in this corner, in this bottom corner. And then you walk through the church. Usually the church is always oriented toward the east. In the Coptic tradition, the reason we always face the east, there's several reasons that are beautiful. The one I particularly like is the paradise of joy, where Adam was created, was in the east. And so we always are looking toward that state of Adam before the fall, right? So when God created man before the fall, he created him in communion and harmony with him. And that state is what we miss and what we've lost. And so we are yearning toward that state. So the church is how we get to that state, right? And so that's where we're looking. That's the goal. That's the target. Okay. So the dome, and then here you see the dome up here, usually it has the Christ the Pantocrator on it. The dome is always a circle, like I said before. And what's interesting about a dome is it's a circle that sits usually on a rectangle. So it's got a beautiful meaning that the dome is always a symbol of infinity, of God. And then the church building, the structure itself, usually has four corners. And that represents the four corners of the earth. And so the square, the rectangle is earth, and the dome is heaven. And so the church is where heaven and earth come together, right? And if the church is the body of Christ, Christ is God and man. And Christ is where God and man were united without separation and without, not for a single moment or a twinkling of an eye. Okay, so I like that, this symbolism that the dome comes down, sits on the earth, and this is where heaven meets earth, right? And this is the beautiful part of the church, and usually symbol, and then usually put a cross always at the highest point of the church. This one is interesting because it's got four things, so you can see tell it's a cross from any direction you look at it. That's why they make it like that. This is what the dome looks like inside. This is the Christ the Pantocrator. Usually they'll put blue around the dome and stars because it represents Christ in heaven. So you look up and you see heaven, although you're sitting on earth. And then usually they'll put in the four corners, the four evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they will be, looking towards Christ and writing about him. The iconostasis is a screen, literally means an icon screen or an icon holder. And it's this brown structure here that separates the sanctuary from the nave. And it does several things. First, it holds the icons. But then second, some people think it separates the sanctuary from the altar, the sanctuary from the nave. It doesn't really separate as much as it connects, because if the sanctuary is heaven, right, and we move from earth to heaven, the connection between earth and heaven are the saints, are Christ, right? So they're standing, if you will, it's almost like they're standing with their backs to heaven, and that's why we always have the gold behind them, and we'll talk about that next time. They're standing in heaven and they're looking at us, and they're yearning for us to join them, and they're praying for us. And they're encouraging us, and they're like, come on, you can finish this race. So we look at them, they're in the east, they're in the paradise of joy where Adam was created. They're in heaven with God, they're in communion with God, and they're looking at us like, come, join us, and they want us to be there with them. And so they're the connection between us and heaven. They're that middle ground. The icon screen always has a certain tradition to it. Always on top, you have Christ, and then John and Mary. John and Mary underneath the cross, the two that made it to the cross. There's always the Last Supper in the middle. And then you always have the 12 apostles here on either side. Interesting note that this icon has Judas in it. This is the traditional way to depict the Last Supper. You always want the icon with Judas in it, because after he took communion, he then left and went and sold Christ. And then we always have Christ and Saint Mary on either side. And Christ and Saint Mary, Christ is always the king, and Saint Mary is his queen, so she's always to his right. So if you look at this icon, you flip it, she's standing on his right, and even in this icon, she's on his right again. So even when she's sitting on his lap, they don't always put him in the middle; they'll put him just slightly off the middle in the Coptic tradition. This one's obviously very beautiful. And then over here to the side, you can see that John the Baptist, the icon of Saint John the Baptist, is here. Usually, they put the icon of the Epiphany in here. The icon of the Epiphany usually is in the baptistry. The traditional icon that should be here is actually the icon of St. John the Baptist himself, usually the one with his wings holding his head. Unfortunately, this has disappeared from the Coptic tradition over the last 40 years. I think this icon was a pet peeve of Bashnuda's, and so he kind of ordered that icon be removed. And so now we just have the icon of the Epiphany twice. We have it here next to Christ, and then we have it next in the baptistry over the baptismal font. And then here you can put the saints of the church, and here you see looks like Saint Maurice. And this is just another view of the church. These are the two mengaleias, or the place podiums where you read from. And then this is a different iconostasis, of course, but here you have the royal doors. And so on the royal doors, you put in, so this design is interesting because these doors has the Last Supper in it. Oftentimes, on the side of Saint Mary, you have the Annunciation here, and then you should have the Annunciation on the royal doors. So this is an interesting design because I don't think it's very traditional. Usually the royal doors have the Annunciation on them, and the reason is the door is the entryway into this process of the incarnation and the birth of Christ, and the doors are, and that's why we put the Annunciation there, because that's the first step that happened in this process of salvation, right? Christ came to Saint Mary, and this started this is when Christ came to earth, right? This is when she conceived, and Angel Gabriel gave her all the good news. And I love this icon here. This is just a different church at St. Verena. I just love it. So I put it up there because it's so beautiful, of Saint Mary receiving the good news from Gabriel. And then now you have back here, if you look, there's usually back here, there's the icon of the Pantocrator. And in this corner, if we go back way back here, you can see usually this part here is curved. Okay, so this is called the apse or the niche, or usually it's called the bosom of the Father. In Arabic, it's Hodn al-Ab. And usually you have an icon of Christ as the Pantocrator in that icon, in that little area. So here you can see the icon of Christ. He's surrounded by the 24 priests. This is from the book of Revelation. It says there's 24 priests with bowls of incense, offering him incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And that's why in our church, the incense is always a symbol of the prayers of the saints. And around him, you have the four bodiless creatures. We'll get a little bit closer look here in a second. There's the four bodiless creatures. One is the face of a man, one is the face of an eagle, one is the face of an ox, and one is the face of a lion. And these always represent the four evangelists. The face of a man the face of an eagle is St. John. The face of the lion is St. Mark. The face of the ox is, St. Luke. The face of the lion is St. Mark. And the face of a man is St. Matthew. Each one, John talked about the divinity of Christ. That's why we put him as an eagle that flies high. The one is the face of a bull is St. Luke, because he often talked about the sacrifices of the Old Testament. The face of the lion is St. Mark, because he starts his gospel about St. John, someone who is walking in the wilderness, make straight the paths of the Lord. And the face of a man is St. Matthew, because he talked about his humanity. And then here you can see a different view of the 24 priests. This is Stefan Rene writing an icon, I think it's in New Jersey, of the Pantocrator, which again is just super beautiful. And then again, you can see the 4 bodiless creatures there as well. And this is another one, I think this one is in Australia, where you can see the cherubim and the seraphim as well, with their 6 wings. With 2 they cover their face, with 2 they cover their feet, and with 2 they fly, and they're full of eyes. And so this is different imaginations of what these wings would look like from the book of Isaiah. Okay, and then regarding the sanctuary, what we always put in the sanctuary is the altar. This is, you can see the curved bosom of the Father there. Here, I'll go back to this. Oh, here, this one's a good one. You can see the sanctuary here is, the altar here can be several different materials. It can be stone, which it usually is marble, or it could be wood, or it could be steel. It's usually hollow inside, because inside we used to put the relics of the martyrs. And so this is where the tradition of naming the churches comes from. It used to be when you went to St. George's Church, the reason it's called St. George's is because the relics of St. George were in that church. And so this is where the tradition of naming the churches came from. Obviously, we ran out of actual relics of saints, so we just started naming them without the relics being in there. But usually they're hollow inside for several reasons. That way you can put the relics of the saint underneath them. Also, in case the church is attacked, you can take the mysteries and you can hide them underneath the altar as well. So they're usually hollow inside. You can see this one has 2 candles on it. That's not very traditional. The correct thing is not to put really anything on the altar. So usually the candle stands should be separate and freestanding on their own. Even deacons, when they put their books or they lean, none of that's really respectful to the altar. Even if you have a book, you hold it, or you at least don't lean on the altar yourself. So the keys don't put anything on the altar. And then on the altar on itself is this what we call the ark, which is what holds the chalice. And the chalice is obviously top heavy, right? Because of all the blood is in the top, and so it can tip over easily. So this chalice, the ark comes down and holds the chalice in place. And as you know, the sanctuary is a very blessed place, and we take our shoes off in the sanctuary. Because Moses, when we get this symbolism from Moses, when he stood in front of the burning bush, he said, "Take off your shoes, for where you stand is holy ground." So we've learned that God views things this way. Having said that, one very important thing here, again, going back, is we don't take our shoes off because God gets upset if we put our shoes on. We take our shoes off for us. Because it's something that gives us reverence to the place. Not that, it's forbidden to wear your shoes and, someone's going to get angry. And, people, when some poor little kid walks in the altar with their shoes on, God forbid, 30 adults jump in and say, "Hey, take your shoes off," like it's some, really, really important thing. No, we take our shoes off because it helps me as a person realize this is a holy place, and I'm going to separate it by doing something silly and little and meaningless, like take my shoes off, right? But for me, it distinguishes this place as a different kind of place. It's not the place of the world where I keep my shoes on. That's it for the talk on the church. I hope you enjoyed it, and God willing, we opened escrow 2 days ago on our own church building. So God willing, we will maybe have some more talks on the church building as we start to work through the rituals of the church ourselves. Okay, thank you very much. And God bless all of you, and hope to see you in person at some point.